It's difficult building a brand. It's like being dragged through asphalt and glass, and startups are tough. Things happen in business that are out of your control, and it impacts your business. And then, so what do you do?
Well, hey, and welcome back to the Amanda Kaufman Show. And I'm so excited to introduce you to Tom Shipley. He is a serial entrepreneur, an M&A strategist. And for those that don't know, that's mergers and acquisitions. And he's the creator of Add a Zero growth philosophy. He's been helping founders to X their business through strategic acquisitions. Tom, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, excited to be here.
Oh my gosh. So mergers and acquisitions, when I very first started as an entrepreneur about 8 years ago, it was all about getting clients and getting started and writing. We were talking about copy before we went live. And it was just like this frenzy of you have to be in the room and you have to talk to people and then you have to sell something great. There's just all this noise, I think, around the front of building a business. And why I was so excited to have you here today is because you're talking about businesses as assets and you're talking about building something that really lasts. So I have to ask you, what told you when you were an entrepreneur that you needed to do something differently to grow to that next level?
I didn't start with is when I did my first 2 acquisitions, I didn't know any better. There was no one teaching this. There was no rule books back then. And it was just the first one I fell into, and my second one, both were acts of I had no other choices. What do you do when your business runs out of money? And let's put it this way, as an entrepreneur, it's difficult building a brand. Building a business from scratch, it's like being dragged through asphalt and glass, and startups are tough. So I remember my first business is, from concept to getting it up to the level we did to a nice solid business, it was just a miracle. And then we had this great little business, and then things happen in business, whether it's the .com crash going back and the .com bust, whether it's the 2007, 2008, whether it's COVID, whether it's 9/11, things happen in business that are out of your control, and it impacts your business. And then, so what do you do? And for me, with my first business is we were doing great. It was an online store. We mailing out millions of catalogs, and we grew this from our initial fundraising where I raised $10,000, and suddenly life is going good. Winds at our back. .com bust happens. Recession hits. We're losing money. My CFO says we have 90 days of cash left. As I think I share with you, I knew that was nonsense because I knew we had 90 days. We'd stretch it for 90 days. He's being a little bit dramatic, and we were very fortunate that a gentleman that I met at a catalog conference at that time was an investment banker. And he said, Tom, I have the perfect acquisition for you. And I went, I don't have money for payroll in my head. But I said, sure. And in that case, he was representing companies selling it off, and they have an orphaned asset that the buyer didn't want, which was a $15 million business. And for us, that was twice our size. And so we worked a deal out within 90 days. We acquired this business. I got an ROI in 30 days. And a year later, I exited that business. And it was like, wow, that was cool. But I didn't think of that as a business model. But imagine this is 90 days time outside when we solved our cash flow issue and we were triple the size. Okay. So, and we were out of cash when we did that.
Like I'm trying to think of examples in business where you would do that in 30 days. No way.
Or 90 days. Yeah. Or 90 days. How could you do that?
Or even 90 days.
You can't.
Yeah.
You can't. Most people, let's just say this, most people grind really hard and they say, we're going to go for a 15 or 20% growth. But we know that it goes like this. So if they average 10% growth a year for 5 years, assuming nothing bad happens, they increase their value of their business by 50%. 5 years of grinding and they increase their business by 50%. Compare that with an acquisition. Now let me fast forward 3 years later, where we decided to take my blueprint for building iconic brands using direct response marketing, applying to the industry. Everyone said we'd fail, especially 2 former special forces guys in Richmond, Virginia, saying, we're going to build a $100 million beauty brand. And everyone laughed at us. We're not from the industry. We don't know. No one's ever used direct response in 2005 to build an iconic beauty brand. And here we are. We said, watch us. And suddenly at the end of the year, we proved the model worked, but at $331,000 in sales, again, Richmond, Virginia, two former special forces guys, we proved the model worked, but we lost a little bit of money. We couldn't borrow the money. We couldn't raise any money. But what do you do when you run out of money? I learned from lesson one is you buy a business. We bought a $15 million business, bring off $1 million in cash flow. But let's go back to what acquisitions do. One is you can solve almost every business challenge through acquisition. What was our challenge? We didn't have cash and cash flow. Number two is back then, there was no SaaS platforms you could plug into. There was no Shopify. There was no microsite platform. So we actually needed a platform, a funnel or a microsite platform. We didn't have a team. Everything else was great. So we needed everything. And suddenly we did this acquisition and everything we needed. We put our little $331,000 brand on top of this little $15 million platform. And within 3 years, we did $100 million. That little skincare brand, we did $1 billion over its life cycle. Now, if you think about it, we didn't have resources. We didn't have money. Again, we knew we had this big aspiration, but we had some real key challenges. Acquisitions can solve almost every business problem. You can grow. And as going, Amanda.
This is what I'm starting to really begin to appreciate. And I started my career in consulting, and I got to work on some really cool like mergers and acquisitions when I was earlier in my career. We'll just say that. But I could appreciate why like it was actually the biggest merger in Canadian history. There were these big oil and gas companies that were coming together, and I got to work on the merger side of things to help them activate their synergies. So like I understood that, but now I've been an entrepreneur for about 9 years. I'm working on my 9th year. And what I'm really beginning to appreciate more as a founder and as a business owner is that so many business problems or puzzles can be solved if you're willing to look at it through a new lens and a different way. And to your point, I mean, the acquisition, I think a lot of people listening might feel the same feeling that a lot of people have, which is these golden handcuffs. Like I have to keep doing what I'm doing because this is the way, it's the way that it's always been. It's how I've always done this, maybe in their business. You acquired large companies when you had no cash flow. So can you break that down for the listener? Because they may be thinking about acquisitions like I acquire a car. They might be thinking in terms of like consumer acquisition and not business deals.
100%. So let me break down the second acquisition that we did. So here we were, is that we ran out of money. We couldn't feed our own families. Again, things got we just went all in because that's who we were from personality. So we're cash strapped, but the metrics for our business were good. So we were committed, but here we are, we were able to, basically we were doing some consulting with a company in New Jersey, helping them out because we need direct response offline marketing. They're really good online, and we're doing some coaching for them and a way for us to bring in some income. And so we said, now, this is the way it happens. It's very simple is we love your business. We'd love to buy it. And again, we didn't have any resources. Would you be interested in selling it? A lot of times now I get in discussions with different entrepreneurs, and I said, what is your long-term goals? And that's where I start my discussions. Because what's your long-term goals, and when do you want to sell your business? What will you do afterwards? And so I get into discussions, and you'll find out where people's real goals are, which is really, this is selling your baby is people. So with them, they had bigger goals. What are their aspirations, and what do they want to do? And we said, we'd love to buy your business. And suddenly they said, well, for how much? And then we came to a price, and with that, just chatting with them. And then, okay, now we need money to buy this business. Back then, it was an e-com world. We bought it for under about 2.7 times their EBITDA, which is great. So again, from a price perspective. And so then we went out, and I, again, used my network, asked around who can help us find the funds to do it. So, and our accountant said, I have a great broker. This is all he does, and he helps people find debt financing. We met him, And we somehow found the cash up for a retainer for him because we had nothing left. We paid him, and he was great. And he went out and he reached out to his network, put together our book and our plan, reviewed it, and then he reached out to his network, and he had 5 companies that were interested. 3 came into Richmond to meet with us. We presented to them over a 1-day period. And then of that, 2 of them gave us term sheets. And so we bought the business for 85% cash is what we bought it for. But remember, it wasn't that we didn't have any equity put into it. And they didn't loan us the money on a $331,000 business that was losing money. They lent us the money because they saw 2 smart guys buying a profitable business that was growing every year. And 2 very smart guys were coming over to take this over, and we're going all in with that business. So the mezzanine level financing company believed in us. They backed us, and we bought the business. We bought 85% of the business. 2.5 years later, we bought the extra 15% from the owners for as much money as we paid them for the initial 85% because we grew that. So it was a home run for them. It was great for us.
It's just good business. Seneca said that luck is when opportunity meets preparation, And so I understand you have a convention around deal making that you've put together to show entrepreneurs another way forward. So can you talk to us a little bit about what is DealCon and all of that?
Sure. Well, and let me get some context to this is that, over the years, I've done 16 acquisitions and exits. I'm an industrial engineer by background, so therefore you take complex and make it simple into processes. So when it comes to buying businesses, 70% is the processes and systems and knowing what to do. 30% is the EQ because you're buying businesses from people, knowing what to say, how to say, developing relationships, again, having those scripts, but it's all part of the process. And so it happened that I was dragged into with friends, teaching them how to do acquisitions in a group of friends that we got together 3 years ago to teach them. Basically, people asked me, can you teach us your process for programmatic M&A? And my answer was, I'm too busy buying businesses. I don't have time for that. Finally, we said yes. And we had a dozen friends come in Austin. We taught them how to acquire basically our blueprint. And we thought that was great. And then we did it 6 months later for 25 different companies, and then 5 months later, 40. And now every 6 months, we get a group of entrepreneurs together that are action oriented. They're open-minded. They're looking for ways to scale disproportionately to organically. Some of them have clear exit opportunities. They want to sell in 1 year. They want to sell in 5 years. They want to sell in 3 years, or they want to become the platform and do other acquisitions for long-term growth. It really doesn't matter. So we bring 7 to 9 figure entrepreneurs. Our events keeps them growing about 20% each time. So we just had an event in Austin, DealCon CEO M&A Summit with 120 entrepreneurs. And our next one's going to be we're going to cap it at 150. It'll be in Miami, February 9th through 11th. And my goal is very simple. We're passionate, and we will go in. We will share everything from our blueprint, our resources there, our attorney that we use is there, our financing sources there, our brokers there. Our goal is that a lot of times, I think we talk about, Amanda, is that I see entrepreneurs doing acquisitions because they can, but it's kind of like playing with this chainsaw and throwing a chainsaw around, okay? If you know the process and the system, you can responsibly and successfully acquire business. And again, the example I gave was a cash deal we brought money in. But I can share this with you that we bought 2 agencies over the last few years for 5% cash at close. The rest of it's seller notes and earn out. Everything was about the motivation. And the other thing we didn't talk about is just kind of a stat on this. Did you know that there's 1,000 baby boomers that own businesses that are retiring every single day? In the United States, 1,000 baby boomers that own businesses. 2/3 of them, their businesses, only a third will ever sell. 2/3 of their businesses will never sell. What do they do when they don't sell the businesses? Well, they're ready to go on, so they close the businesses down. So The opportunity is there is you go to those business owners and say, hey, I love what you built. I want to take care of your customers and your team. Here's my vision, what I'd like to do for your business. And then you do a financial structure that is really good for them, which is better than them getting zero and closing it down. Their employees are out of work and their customers are out of luck. And again, so that's the paradigm shift. And everything is about seller motivation. I don't like to go through brokers because I don't like to be in that time constrained period of time in a competitive environment. I believe in bite-sized processes where we generate leads, we get to talk to sellers on a regular basis and find ones with businesses that want to sell. And if it's the right one, that's really the magic. And that's the process that we like to teach. And that's the opportunity. But the first thing is changing people's paradigm about what is possible. And then here's how to do it. And then here's the playbook. And that's what we love to teach. And we do this right now twice a year at DealCon.
Amazing. Tom, what is the best way for someone to keep up with you and find out what's next?
Okay, so very simple. Go to my website, tshipley.com, tshipley.com. There's a link to dealconlive.com right there. And there will be links to all my social media handles because I publish regularly on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
Beautiful. And dear listener, we've got all of those links in the show notes below. Thank you so much for shining a light on this opportunity. I know that there are definitely listeners of this show that you need that plan of where you're going to go next. So like really thinking about what are you creating? I love how it can help so many business owners have a real path forward at the time that they want to exit, whether they're exiting to grow some more or they're at a different life stage. Just having all these small businesses and medium businesses and large businesses like really go somewhere through collaboration. Like that's what this is all about. So fantastic. And dear listener, if you love this and you actually have a friend who is in business and wants to learn more about mergers and acquisitions as a strategy, make sure you grab the link to this episode and you text it to them and you tell them how helpful this was for understanding. And don't forget to hit subscribe, of course, for the next episode. And if you really love this, the thing that helps the most is when you take a moment to leave us a kind and honest review because it helps people to choose this show. Tom, thanks you again for being here. Really appreciate you.
Absolutely. Only the best to you, Amanda.
All right. And dear listener, we'll see you next time. And until then, do what matters.